Hi, welcome to Time Warp Wife Ministries. I'm your host, Darlene Schacht, and we're going through a Bible study on the book of Ezra. This week we're discussing chapter 4, which is clothed with the righteousness of Christ. If you don't have a study guide already, you can pick one up. It looks like this, and it's available at Amazon.com. It's called Ezra Bible Study, Rebuilding the Temple, Restoring the Heart. Now, if you can't afford a copy of the Bible study, go to my blog at timewarpwife.com, and you'll find everything that you need there to get started and to join in on our study. Before we get into this chapter, I just wanted to point out one thing. Unfortunately, there is an error in the study guide for our reading assignment this week. It says Ezra chapter 4 and Zechariah chapter 4, but it should be Zechariah chapter 3. So make sure that you change that and read the right chapter before you get in. Anytime I'm working on an article or a new idea for Time Warp Wife or a Bible study like this one, I get the same little voice telling me that I can't. Oh, that voice was terrible when I started this video series because, as I've said before, a video series is the last thing that I ever want to do. I can do public speaking, but put me in front of a video, no, it's just not my thing. It's the most terrifying thing I think I've ever had to face in my life. So that little voice will tell us that we can't in so many areas of our life, and we're going to be talking about that today. It says things to me like, you couldn't possibly know what to write. There are so many better writers out there. You failed grade 12 English, which I did. You're getting old and your ideas aren't so relevant anymore. But here's the weird thing about accusations. A lot of them are true. I am getting old, and there are a lot of better writers out there. I failed grade 12 English, and when it comes to spelling and grammar, I'm not so great. But true or not, accusations should never stop me from doing God's work. As I'm sitting here tuning out the voice, I'm reminded of the voices we find in Ezra chapter 4, the voice of the enemy trying to stop the Israelites from doing God's work. As we dive into this chapter, we see how their adversary is a little craftier than he's been in the past. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, they're deceptive. The enemy offers to help. We worship the same God, they said, and we've been sacrificing to him for years. When the Israelites refused to work with them, they went to the king with their accusations, hoping to have the work stopped. What's interesting to note about this story is that the accusations were true, just as they often are, and sadly, the men stopped building the temple. As much as we might like to think highly of some people, the Bible tells us that no one is righteous, not even one. Yes, we are sinners, and yes, we have failed just like every other believer that's gone on before us. Just as I started this chapter, I had the wrong number on our reading assignment, so there you go. But here's the thing about God. Where sin abounds, his grace abounds all the more. Don't let Satan stop you from doing the work you are called to do. Don't let your past dictate your future. Don't let insecurity cause you to doubt the power of God working in you and through you. Digging a little deeper, we see something interesting taking place behind the scenes of this chapter, and that's found in Zechariah's vision in Zechariah chapter 3. And once again, I'm reminded that there's a spiritual war behind every battle. We see Joshua, the high priest, standing before the Lord. And who is standing beside him? The accuser. He accused Joshua of his sin. He accused Job, and even today he accuses you and I. Now, just a side note, this isn't the same Joshua that we read about in the story of Moses. This is a different Joshua. But just as he starts to point out Joshua's sin, the Lord rebukes him. Joshua was dressed in filthy clothes before the Lord. There's no denying that. In the same way that you and I are guilty of sin, he was guilty of the accusation set before him. But let me say this again. Where sin abounds, His grace abounds all the more. I have taken away your sin, he says, and I will put fine garments upon you. If that sounds familiar to you, it should. It's a foretelling of the righteousness of Christ, the righteousness that clothes each and every believer who puts their faith in God, that we might stand blameless before the King, not having our own righteousness, but that of our Lord Jesus Christ, who was perfect in every way. As I think about these words, I have taken away your sin, I'm reminded of some artwork I was working on the other day. I was writing on a white canvas with a thick black marker, and without realizing it, I missed a letter in my sentence. No problem, I thought, I'll just cover it over with some white paint. Unfortunately, I was wrong. After painting over it several times, the black marker kept seeping through and seeping through. And so it is with our sin. As much as we want to cover it up, it's still there. But here's the thing about God. He doesn't bury or camouflage our sin. He removes it. He takes away the sin, just as he took away Joshua's filthy garments, and then he clothes us with the righteousness of Christ. As far as the east is from the west, so far hath he removed our transgressions from us. Psalm 103, verse 12, King James Version. And finally, I just want to point out one thing that we also see in this chapter. The king's name in this chapter, in the King James Version of the Bible, we see Ahasuerus, or it's Xerxes in the New International Version. This can be a bit confusing because Esther's husband was also called Ahasuerus. The thing is, however, that this chapter takes place around 530 BC, and Esther goes to the palace in 486 BC. So unless her husband is very old, this was likely not the same man. But here's the thing. In chapter 7, verse 1, the name pops up again. Many Bible scholars believe that this was likely Esther's son or her stepson. Even more interesting is the fact that Nehemiah was a cupbearer at the king's palace in Susa, and so it's likely that their paths had crossed. The same King Ahasuerus, the one believed to be Esther's son, assisted Nehemiah with his return to build the wall in Judah. That would be really, really interesting. So that's something to think about, and that is a good possibility. So we're done our chapter this week in the book of Ezra, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I do hope that you join us again next week for chapter 5, which is to instill courage in others. Don't forget to pick up a copy of the study guide if you don't have one already, and head over to my website at timewarpwife.com, where you'll find everything you need, including extra thoughts on each of these chapters. So it's really good to pop in there and visit at least once a week to see what you can find there. And thanks so much for joining me through this journey. I really appreciate you being here, each one of you, and I love you for it. So I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.